I don't think you guys talked about the Doom Eternal soundtrack thing, right? Because Linus asked me to put that in there, but Anthony filled it out, so I still don't know what's going on with that. So I think it's probably best to leave that to next week if Linus still wants to talk about it. Unless you know everything about it.
I know some things about it. This amount of notes is actually crazy. I have a large monitor. It does not fit on the monitor.
Anthony does not screw around.
He doesn't. He dives in. I like it. But yeah, I think I'm just going to start reading through this. I know some of this, so I'm going to have opinions along the way, but based on the amount of notes here, I honestly don't think I know all of this. Anthony says, I did my best to cut this down, but this is a messy one. That's totally legit. Honestly, this being this long, very likely makes a lot of sense. And he intros it with bolded letters, which we don't normally do. It's important. Don't go after anyone. This is not an encouragement to harass anyone or anything. Don't do it. Please.
Don't do it.
Every single time that people say this, and then people are like, oh, it's a coded message to do it. And then they do it anyways. They screw with everything and they make it worse. And it's really freaking annoying. So stop. Don't go after anyone. Seriously. There is proper, I believe we'll see. I think there's legal process happening with this right now.
Yeah, I mean.
Let that go its course.
Yeah, we'll see.
Anyways.
You go ahead.
Doom Eternal's much anticipated soundtrack was released to little acclaim in 2020 when it was discovered that the quality of the mixes were incredibly subpar. Some of the many issues include cuts between songs and sections, sometimes with overlap but no fade, causing clicks and pops, tempo changes, and just various gaps. Outcry surrounding this led to Mick disowning the OST, according to Doom Eternal executive producer Marty Stratton, on the r/Doom subreddit shortly after release. I will add some context here. The soundtrack for Doom Not Eternal, like the previous one, was amazing. Fantastic. And I believe it was made by the same person. Interesting. Moving forward. In his lengthy post, this being Marty Stratton, he defended id, or id Software, ID Software, and sound designer Chad Mossholder. The main issue with the OST itself, according to Stratton, was that id didn't have the original files to mix with, leaving only the in-game files to splice together. It's further claimed that Mick delivered less music than expected in time for the OST's release, necessitating these splices. Mick was said to have supervised Chad on a backup OST and signed off on a combined work. Marty says that id did absolutely nothing to prevent Mick from delivering on his commitments within the time frame he asked for. The harassment faced by id, he said, was a result of comments made by Mick, who had since done, quote unquote, nothing to change the conversation. This is a lot of names. Good luck following it. The ultimate ending of this is going to be, if you're interested, you're going to have to dive into it yourself.
Yeah.
Because Mick and Nick. And
there's a Mick and a Nick?
blah.
Oh my gosh.
I think so. Am I wrong?
And id?
No, it's Mick and Marty.
Oh, Marty.
Sorry, but
Yeah,
they both
yeah.
start with M, which I think is going to get
Mick
hard
and
to
Marty.
follow. But anyways.
At the end of all this, maybe they'll still open up a pasta shop together. A pasta
Wouldn't that
shop.
be cute?
You don't eat there.
very
You just go and buy pasta and take it home. Okay. Continue.
No sauce. Very recently, Mick Gordon posted a very long, very detailed rebuttal. In the post, prompted by damage to his professional reputation, Mick provides evidence that highlights the extreme crunch he was expected to work through. Being asked to write music before areas of the game was created, often resulting in music that did not fit and had to be remade. Having the OST announced while no contract was in place to produce it. Expectation of a new track every 2 weeks, regardless of whether previous tracks had been rejected or had to be redone due to changes in design. That's a huge issue. An extreme push to meet the original November 2022-2019 release date. Threats of lawsuits during arguments over contractual demands, and not being paid for 11 months while this was happening. Whoa, the heck? I didn't know that part. For the OST, Mick says his interaction with Chad was minimal, and he never heard the final product before release. Metadata provided by Chad showed the OST was being made without him for 6 months before he was contracted to do it after it was delayed. Without him, as in, I think, Nick? I don't know. According to Mick, id definitely did have the original source files, but they didn't mix them properly. When it did release, meaning the game, I think, several demo tracks were rejected and thus not paid for. Several demo tracks that were rejected and thus were not paid for because they were rejected were included in the OST, which is not cool. Bad.
No.
Mick says that if he had acted the way Marty says, Bethesda would have had the right to not pay him what they did, including an on-time bonus. Okay. Mick suggests that the real reason the OSC was rushed was because of legal issues surrounding pre-order bonuses and consumer protection laws. Prior to Marty's post, Mick says that Marty had instructed him to not... Holy crap.
Hello?
I can't follow this.
Yeah.
There's too many names. I don't know if I'm just like brain fog from being sick, but I'm reading this out myself. And this
I know.
Crazy.
Honestly, as
Marty, Mick, okay. Marty, Chad, Marty, Mick, Mark.
Oh. Twitter?
Jeez. Okay. Anyways, there's a lot of he said, she said. Moral of the story is don't do or request contract work without a rock solid contract. Contractors aren't employees, and always keep receipts. These are good points. Discussion question. We've heard of crunch in the games industry before. We were literally talking about it before the stream, but mostly in respect to employees, not contractors.
Oh.
How much of this is I don't know if that's true. It's definitely both always. How much of this is a systemic problem, and how much of this is due to the dynamic of management versus contractor? I think it's absolutely both. How many interactions like this happen that aren't high profile and never get properly resolved, and who gets the short end of the stick? That's a lot of discussion.
I will say that, like, one of the only things that I think I can say about this is I think in the games industry particularly, there seems to be a problem with having a lot of this type of conflict happen in the background, and it only really comes out when there's like a big giant online fiasco about it. I feel like when it comes to other industries, maybe like movies, this stuff is more likely to emerge as people are kind of like talking about it in the open a little bit more. But with this, it's like, oh, we found out after the fact that all of these employees from these game studios have been completely I will say that, like, when it comes to like visual effects and other things, like there have been similar, scandals in other industries. It just seems that this is a gut feeling that in the games industry, it seems like this stuff seems to be swept under the rug a bit more, which is not good.
Yeah. I think a lot of people just swallow the pill that they're working in the games industry, so they'll deal with it.
Right. Because there's this belief in crunch. It's like a cultural thing almost. Depending now, definitely. Whether it's changing, but
it's also a very difficult thing because games are often, not always, obviously, but games are often, especially this one, I would include in there, very complicated systems that have to be worked on by a huge variety of teams, and those teams are going to have different delays. And then the ability for other teams to be able to progress in their work is going to lean on a different team achieving their goal. So if Team A has a delay, that delays Team B's ability to work on something. So a lot of these delays will cascade into even more delays, and it becomes software development is already a situation where it's nigh impossible to make accurate timeline estimations of how long it's going to take you to do something. You can make very educated guesses. Then you can run into problems that there was no way you could have foreseen that can just wreck everything.
Right. Some people are pointing... Oh, good.
There's also a huge chance for scope changes. This is a huge problem in the gaming industry. Something will happen. Remember when Battle Royales just blew up and every game in development was like, oh, wait, we need a Battle Royale. Oh, my goodness. That's a pretty major scope change, for example. But yeah, it can be really rough. Also, gamers.
Oh yeah,
not the greatest audience to have in this scenario.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna be pissed about crunch, but then if your game is late, you're the worst person on the planet. So it's like, And
I will say, to validate what you were saying about Twitter earlier, it definitely seems like gamers are online more so than fans of other entertainment mediums. I don't think that you're getting like, with movies and stuff, you have people like backlash, but like with games, it's like every little game that is able to have a Twitter account and post updates is liable to be swarmed by people who are unhappy with decisions they make. Less so for like smaller movies and whatnot. So
because they're very, very loud. They will complain about things very quickly and very intensely, but they absolutely refuse to vote with their wallet. They will review bomb things. They'll do all this other kind of stuff. One of my favorite things to see is where people will catch people in screenshots where they have review bombed something and then bought it afterwards. People who will be like, I will never buy this thing, and then you can see it's like in their account, so they clearly did buy it. It's like that's gamers, in my opinion. They will scream about something, they'll say it's the worst, most vile thing ever, and then they'll buy it and buy all the DLC and buy all the optional skins and spend every dollar they possibly can on the game.
I will say that I'm on a movie podcast, so I feel the need. I empathize with the need to kind of like play what other people are playing, and like, oh, this game just came out, everyone's talking about it. I need to play it because I need to have a take so that I can post about it or talk about it on Discord or whatever. And like, I don't want to have to avoid spoilers. There's all sorts of things. So I empathize with that thing because on a movie podcast, you got to keep up with what's going on. You got to watch the new movie. But at the same time, after having a kid, I have way less time to keep up with things. So I've never really been good at playing like the super new game, but even less so now. And I feel like if you allow yourself to kind of get rid of that need to like play every game when it comes out, so that you can take part in the whatever you call it. I mean, dogpiling on people online. It's actually pretty cool if you just kind of chill out and you're like, I can play some of these 300 games in my Steam library. I don't need to keep buying things, Yeah. Minimalism.
Yeah. Come on, guys.
The other thing that I wanted to mention real quick is that people were posting in the chat, tech unions. It's unions in games is like it's starting to change, but there's not a whole lot of worker protections because there's so much contract work and stuff, and we kind of alluded to that earlier. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say.
So that's what I was saying too. Is like there was the discussion question, but like we hear about it with employees, but not contractors.
Right.
There's a huge amount of contractors in the game development space. You probably don't realize they're not employees.
Right.
But yeah, it's totally a thing.
Okay, let's move on.